Hey there guys, alright, today we are back with another History with Hilbert video. This should be a lot more relaxing than the video we watched yesterday by Weird History. That video pissed me off. Anyways, this is what happened to the old Japanese flag. I guess is our kind of just Japan moving on from the whole imperialism route, you know, stepping away from imperialism and instead shifting towards democracy. Perhaps this change was aided by the United States. These are just some of my guesses here before we get in. So, anyways, let's go ahead and dive right in.
This is the Japanese flag, and actually coincidentally, it's also a pie chart of how much of Japan is Japan.
Motherfucker.
As the meme goes. But in this video, I want to take a look at the history of this flag, because as we can see from this really nice image, it's already quite an old flag that was used for a long time. But of course, if we look at some more of Japan's recent history, like in the Second World War for example, we find another flag, a rising sun flag. So in this video I want to look at when did this change? Was there a change in flag, and how are these two flags related? Why do we find in the earlier period
So it sounds like a little bit similar to the German flag?
today that this flag without the bars is found, but in the past you do find this one in the Second World War? Well, first of all, the flag without the bars on, so just with the red dot, is called the Hinomaru. And this is relating to the sun. It's called, the flag of the rising sun is often used for the other one, but actually the red dot is also symbolizing the sun. And this is again to do with the name of Japan in Japanese, Nippon. This actually means the land of the rising sun, or it has a lot of connotations with that. In the Japanese folk religion,
The sun is huge for Japanese, like, mythos and history.
or Shinto, you have Amaterasu, which is one of the sun goddesses, and for the Japanese, the emperors were thought to be incarnations of the sun, descendants of the sun. So this is clearly very important. Now in Japan, you had a lot of noble families of different ruling classes, and these had their own symbols as well, called mon. And actually one of these might be very familiar. One is of the Mitsubishi clan, which of course today they've started producing cars, so they're famous worldwide. Another on there, the yellow one, is the imperial symbol, and the others I just really liked because they've got cranes on them in black and white.
Those are very pretty.
But essentially,
flags, yeah.
that was the case in Japan.
symbol.
You also had, of course, the Hinomaru, this with the sun flag, but it wasn't connected to a national idea. Although when many of these families did start to fight each other and to try to take over Japan, like Oda Nobunaga, Tokugawa, and various others, they would often see this flag as a symbol that represented bringing every of these clans together. Now in 1854, the situation changes slightly, because at this point the Tokugawa shogunate is ruling over Japan. They've conquered all of Japan, and so they actually order that their merchant ships should use this flag on their ships. Now this again is because of increased contact with Europeans. Of course, when Europeans came to trade, they all had flags on so you could identify where they were from, and so this is an idea that the Japanese borrowed. Now in 1870 actually, they passed that this was the official flag, the de jure flag of Japan, the Hinomaru, and that it was also used on merchant vessels, for example, so both on the sea and on land this became the official flag. However, in 1885 there was a law passed that essentially got rid of all the old laws that weren't in this Gazette of Laws that had been published. And actually one of those laws was the fairly modern law from 1870 that had made this the official flag. So technically from 1885 onwards, Japan had no de jure flag. However, of course, the Hinomaru remained the de facto flag, as in they continued to use it, but legally speaking, it wasn't their national flag. And we can see this from artwork at the time. Of course, the late 19th century is when the Japanese Empire was founded. They started to expand outwards into China. This image is from the end of the First Sino-Japanese War, and you can see on the tents, obviously, they have the red Hinomaru being shown. And in this image, for example, from the Second Sino-Japanese War, after the invasion of Manchuria, you can see they're using the Five Races flag, which I talked about in my video about the Chinese flags, and also the Hinomaru to represent Japan there. But in this image from the Russo-Japanese War at the turn of the 20th century, we do actually see another flag being used. Here. And actually this flag is often called the Rising Sun flag, and this is the one that I mentioned earlier. And this is actually a
yeah, I would if you put both flags in front of me and told me, all right, you have to pick one of these as the Rising Sun flag. I would just go with
special
that one
variant
being
of
Rising
that
Sun, even though both, represent the rising sun.
flag. But as I said, it's known as the Rising Sun flag in English, or in Japanese as the Hiyashi. And actually this symbol is also found on some of the clan Mon from earlier in Japan, this rising sun again. The sun of course is a very important symbol for the Japanese, as I said, and the rising sun motif with the rays coming off the sun is also an older idea in Japan. And actually in 1870, when you had the merchant flag and the national flag on land becoming the Hinomaru, actually the Hiyashi is also adopted at the same time, but for the war fleet of the Japanese, for the military ships that they had. And this is of course the famous flag that we most often associate with the Japanese in the Second World War, or at least I certainly do.
I would say the average person certainly
Especially,
does.
actually, that there are two different versions of this. Now, I always thought the one on the left was just the Japanese flag with the sun slightly offset. But in fact, there is actually a difference, because there is another variant which has the flag, the sun exactly.
I don't think I've ever seen the one on the right.
In the middle, so it's horizontal. And this is because with it in the middle, it was the flag of the army, so the land forces. Whereas the offset version was actually the flag flown by the Japanese Navy. So in 19 the flag flown by the Japanese
Everyone comment that the information
Navy. So in 1945, of course, the Second World War came to an end, the Japanese surrendered, and most of the time when people surrender, that means that there's a change that occurs, and in the case of the Second World War, it meant that a lot of flags changed as well. Think, for example, today the Germans don't use the swastika anymore, and for good reason. And of course, this meant that the Navy also changed its flags, and the country itself, of course, kept the Hinomaru as we know it. But the Navy really did like the old flag, and so in 1954, actually, they changed the flag, but not really. They basically just made the shade of red lighter. Now, we have actually got another game of Spot the Difference coming up. And this is because in 1974, there was a bit of a crisis in Japan, and several of the politicians tried to push through a bill to make this the official flag. Because, of course, while it was being used de facto, de jure, it wasn't the flag and hadn't been since 1885. But there was a lot of opposition to this because of Japan's role in the Second World War. It's also why they don't have essentially an army that goes out to fight in other places. If you look at the name of the Navy, it's not called the Japanese Navy, it's the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force, and I believe the army is called something similar to the Self-Defense Forces of Japan, because of this stance that they took after the Second World War. But
it's not that they took the stance, it's that they were kind of forced into this stance by the treaties, by the end of the war treaty.
But there was a lot of opposition to it, and it didn't go through. However, it came to a head again in 1999
so they really
after a
still
school
didn't have an
teacher committed suicide because of this debate that had gone on in the school about whether they could fly the Hinomaru, so the flag, and sing the national anthem as well. And actually this prompted there to be a bill that actually did manage to get through Parliament, so it officially became the flag. But at this point they had to stipify which of the shades of red they actually had to use. And so there is another meme which is
I do like this shade of red on the right over this shade of red on the left.
Copy your homework kind of thing, which is about the Japanese flag changing from a slightly darker shade to a slightly lighter shade. And it does seem that nowadays the Japanese do use a slightly lighter shade of red. But there are even more controversies to do with the rising sun flag outside of Japan. Whereas inside Japan, the Hinomaru controversy was very big. Outside of Japan, no one really thinks that the Japanese flag is controversial. However, it's not the same with the rising sun flag. And this came to a head in 2018 when there were joint military activities going on, training sort of expeditions going on
I can see that flag.
in South Korea. And the South Koreans specifically asked the Japanese Navy, the Maritime Self-Defense Forces, not to fly the rising sun flag, just their national flag and the flag of Korea. However, the Japanese admiral at the time said, absolutely not, we're flying our flag, and this is our naval flag, and we're proud of it, and so we'll fly it. But actually the South Koreans then said, no, you really have to change that. You can't show it here because it's offensive to Koreans. And so the Japanese pulled out of the military practices there, which just goes to show how strongly people feel about these flags. Because for the Japanese,
I think this also has to do probably with that admiral's education, the education of the older Japanese. Now, of course, as someone that is not Japanese, does not know too much of modern Japanese education, I do know post-war, though, and from what I've seen online, it seems that Japanese education on the atrocities that they had committed during World War II is not well taught. Now, I don't know if this is the case for the younger generation, right? This is a thing that is happening in America, right? This is a similar thing, right? My generation has been taught the atrocities that the United States has committed to the native people. The older generations have not really been taught that. We're not really taught that. However, my generation certainly was. So if you hear anyone from my generation saying that they didn't know this shit about, United States treatment of the Native Americans, you can call them out on their bullshit. You can say that they just were not paying attention in school. So I'm wondering if this is a similar trend that is happening in Japan. If the younger Japanese are learning about the atrocities that their nation had committed during the war. And then the older generation is just didn't know themselves.
Is their maritime flag. They're proud of it. They say it's their proud maritime tradition. They're a proud people.
I will side with Korea on this case. I do not, because flags are representative of, countries, and that flag specifically does represent Japan of World War II. And yeah, like, obviously the swastika's original meaning came from, I believe, Indian culture, the Indian subcontinent. However, because of Hitler and how he shifted the swastika, it is not a good symbol anymore, right? Now, of course, I believe there are differences between the swastika, the design in the Indian subcontinent, right? I think it's designed differently than what Hitler used. So there is a difference there, but of course the symbol that Hitler used, that's not a good symbol no more. It's a bad symbol.
But
just like that flag there of the rising sun for Japan is representative, in my mind, of Japan of the 1930s and 40s.
People like, especially the Koreans and also the Chinese and other people in Asia, that flag, the rising sun flag, is a sign of the past, of the Second World War, when many atrocities, terrible atrocities, were committed in the name of the Imperial Japanese Empire, and the flag is a symbol of that to them. And some would even go as far to say as that the Japanese rising sun flag is actually tantamount to showing the Nazi swastika in Europe at the same time. So I don't know what you think about this, but I thought it was a very interesting topic to look at where these two flags came.
I think that was a decent video. I don't think it didn't seem to go as smoothly as the video on the German flag. It seemed he was, I don't know, he said a lot. Like, he didn't seem, I don't know, he just seemed a little off in this video with his delivery, which, it happens. I don't know if this video is older than the one he did on German flag, so I don't know. But I like the information that he presented here. I hope you guys did too. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.